Night school.
Night school.
We're talking about power of now, and it's going to be a deep dive in some concepts around power of now. It's not going to be like a point-by-point summary of what Eckhart is saying about power of now, because we did an episode on power of now and covered the basics of it. But since we did that episode, I have listened to the audiobook like 5 times. I've been in a Power of Now study group for like 2 months.
Right, yeah.
And started studying A Course in Miracles, which is Eckhart's most cited or most quoted scripture. And so that has helped give me some insight on where he's coming from, especially because A Course in Miracles has a 365-day text, which clarifies concepts like what is forgiveness, what is grace, what is time, things like that. And then it has a 365-day workbook where you practice thoughts that help you to... They're basically thoughts that undo thoughts. So, like, you know how Ted Kaczynski believed that technology should only be used to destroy technology?
Yeah.
So the Eckhart A Course in Miracles train of thought is similar pertaining to thinking. The purpose of thinking is to unwind thinking.
Okay.
So that you can be fully present.
Cool.
And so the workbook does that. And then afterwards, this is what I'm getting at, is the manual for teachers. So there's a manual for people who have gone through the whole Course in Miracles training and are ready to help other people to integrate what it says. But each person does that in their own unique way. Mm-hmm. And so they call this a teacher of God establishing their own curriculum. So reading that section and has given me a lot of insight into what Eckhart means when he says when he has trainings to become a teacher of presence, mm-hmm. and how his perspective on presence is his own curriculum of the Holy Spirit as defined by A Course in Miracles.
Okay.
And then I'm also going to relate let's start somewhere funny last week. I was at Barnes & Noble, mm-hmm. and I opened up the Satanic Bible because I just had a feeling to browse through it and read a couple things in it. And I had been having this ongoing argument in my head with, like, it was somebody I had an argument with, a mindfulness teacher that I know, and the argument kept replaying in my head. Like, I kept having the argument for like months now because the argument is, my friend who's a mindfulness teacher, his name is Paul. He says that the supreme human realization or human accomplishment is to be fully conscious of the physical, because he is trained in Kabbalah, and the physical is considered the most gross or least subtle plane of existence.
Okay.
And consciousness or attention, an attribute of the divine, is it's a quality of the highest realm, which is the supreme unity of God. And so the goal is to unite the highest with the lowest by being fully conscious of matter. And that's his definition of mindfulness. And that's his definition of, like, the secret to the universe. Okay. And the reason I hate that is that matter to me is, well, first of all, it's not the lowest plane, because the lowest plane is complete malevolence. And second, it is not ontologically real because it's just the vibration of unity. It's not that matter even has a genuine existence unto itself. Physics doesn't think that it does. Mm-hmm. So how can it be the supreme realization to give your full attention to something that doesn't technically exist and isn't quite the lowest plane anyway? So we've gone back and forth and had like really fun, friendly arguments about this. When I read Eckhart, I started watching his interviews, and in his interviews, he says he doesn't like the word mindfulness. He likes the word presence instead, because mindfulness implies that the mind is full of stuff. Like, I'm so present with my experience. My mind is so full of all the stuff in this room, and all the stuff on your face, and all the stuff that you're saying, and all the stuff that I'm thinking about in the background. My mind is so full. That's what we don't want. What we want is to go beyond the images of the movie that we're experiencing to become the silence behind the projector. We want to go beyond the thinking and the forms to what we're projecting experience from, and experience that kind of internal silence. And then if we look at objects from that perspective, they're all contextualized by unity. So none of them are particularly exciting or anxiety provoking, because they're all firmly in the context of unity. So that's Eckhart's goal. Now, back to the Satanic Bible. I open it up, and this is what I was like, I got to go read Paul. I haven't read Paul this yet. But it says, the supreme human accomplishment is to attach consciousness to matter. Because So, for example, this is one definition of Satan. I've told you one of the definitions of Satan is separation. One of them is accuser. Another one that was articulated by Rudolf Steiner is the devil has these two branches, Lucifer and Satan. Lucifer is that force which wants to intoxify humans with the illusion that they are omniscient. They know everything.
Okay.
And Satan is that which wants to attach human beings to physical matter, to material reality, as though it's the only thing that is. And so those are the two kind of primary tricks.
Okay.
And so, like, the science skeptard that's just like, this is the only thing that's real. I know everything. I figured it all out. They got both. They got, Satan and Lucifer, omniscient, attached to matter.
Because they're kind of on opposite ends of it. So it's kind of like two ways that you can fall off of the path.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So on the Lucifer end, for example, the Freemasons are Luciferian. So I hung out with the Freemasons for a while because I wanted to be in community with people who are interested in mystical and esoteric knowledge. What I found, though, was that they studied all of the deepest systems, like ancient alchemy, ancient Egyptian cosmology, Kabbalah, which was an extremely comprehensive mystical system, celebrated and practiced by ancient Hebrews. And they studied all of these systems of knowledge, and they thought that if they plugged all these systems of knowledge into each other, like the all true maps must converge principle,
sure,
they would be able to create a complete map of reality, and they would be omniscient. That's the Freemason delusion. And so I sat down with a Freemason when I realized why I didn't want to be a part of it, because I want to make my mind silent so I can be in Christ consciousness. I want to be present. I want to be silent. I want to be love. I want to be grace. I don't want to be full of mystical knowledge. Like, how could I possibly, with finite knowledge, map the infinite? It's insane. And I noticed that they were kind of insecure and always grasping and always trying to prove how smart they were. And I'm like, this isn't it. You don't have to prove something when you're grounded in truth. So I sat down with one of them and I told him, I think this is Luciferian. I think that's what's going on here. And I think it's about trying to map the infinite with finite knowledge, and that it's this kind of dead end. And he said, well, if you want to, he didn't deny that it was Luciferian. I said, this is Luciferian, right? He goes, well, you could say, you define it how you want to define it, pretty much. And he said, you take, you have a certain pair of glasses as a human being with a finite perspective. You got blue-toned glasses. You got to put on everybody's glasses in order to understand how everybody sees things, so we can create a unified world. And the stance I was taking in this discussion was, no, you need to take off the glasses. The game is to take off all glasses. You can't put on all glasses. Because if you have blue and then you put on yellow, you're not seeing yellow, you're seeing green. So you would have to take off your blues to put on the yellow to see the way someone else sees. But by the time you took off the blues, you'd realize, oh my God, this is it. I can see. So that's the Luciferian delusion. And then the satanic delusion is that only matter is real and our attachment to it is supreme. The Course in Miracles takes a very, very different approach, which is that awareness split into consciousness, so calling consciousness multiple choice mode awareness, and then that projected all of this diversity. And this diversity that we see, all these diverse objects divorced from unity, seeming like they have their own existence unto themselves, is the chaos that we're trying to escape from. And Eckhart proposes complete presence, not mindfulness, as in being full of data and information and, so being enamored with it, but presence, as in being content with just the sense of isness, being content just with existence. He proposes that as a solution to waking up from the dream of life, because if we can remember what we are fundamentally, and if we can be what we are fundamentally, which is just existence, just presence, just isness, which seems to be Eckhart's favorite word for God in this book, is isness, then we won't have an attachment or a reactive nature towards any of the stuff that manifests within or without us, because we'll be fixed in that. We'll be fixed in something that's permanent instead of something that's temporary.
Okay, yeah. I like the word isness. It's very baggageless. It's his own unique word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of a clunky start because I went through so many different subjects that were in my notes and tied them together. So I'm just going to continue like that.
Sure.
Eckhart Tolle, after he had his awakening, where he basically got so depressed that he committed a psychological suicide and said, I don't want to be anything that I am. Mm-hmm. And then he realized, but if I don't want to be anything I am, then what am I that doesn't want to be anything that I am?
Right.
I must be the I that can't tolerate myself, not myself that can't be tolerated.
Love that.
And he spontaneously dropped everything. After that happened, and when it happened, just in case you want to try this as a spiritual practice, when it happened, he heard a voice from his chest saying, resist nothing. And he let go, and he was sucked into a black hole vividly. It was like a painful, huge experience, like some kind of crazy birth. He sucked into a black hole, and then he woke up enlightened. And after that happened, he read some of the old writings of Meister Eckhart and remembered writing them and named himself Eckhart Tolle. So he experienced himself as the reincarnation of Meister Eckhart. There's several ways to think about what exactly that means, which is fine. But I think it's fascinating to look at the thread from Meister Eckhart to Eckhart Tolle, because what Eckhart Tolle is doing is Christian mysticism at the deepest level possible, expressed in such practical language that it doesn't come off as Christian or mystical. It comes off as just so obviously like, be fully present. What could you possibly be but presence itself?
Yeah.
What could possibly be hearing me right now but your awareness? That's what you are. Just be that, not the stuff on the outside. He's not saying, tap into the Holy Spirit within yourself or experience salvation, or he's not saying it in Christian words because he doesn't have to. But what he's doing is an outgrowth of ancient Christian mysticism. And the way that Meister Eckhart communicated was so... Here's one. This is Genesis Meditations by Neil Douglas Klotz, and it has a couple of translations of old Meister Eckhart sermons. So here's one. This is a 13th century in Germany. The beginning in which God created the heaven and earth is the first simple now of eternity. Someone asked me, why didn't God create the world before? I answered, how could God have created the world before when God created it later in the same now that God is? And this is extremely unique among Christian mystics. This particular curriculum, this particular way of expressing truth is extremely unique. You don't hear a bunch of Christian mystical teachers throughout history saying that everything is the eternal now.
This wasn't like everybody at his monastery was saying this. This was his thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's another one from Meister Eckhart. All time happens in one present now. This is God and the soul's real day. As the heavens begin to revolve and day follows night, time begins and the human soul falls into this existence. By the natural light of the soul's real day, which includes day and night, we see everything in the now moment, which to the soul looks like eternity. The Father makes love to the soul, and together they create the Son. Whenever this happens, the soul gives birth to the only begotten Son. So the Virgin has many more sons than an ordinary woman. But this also means that no matter how many times the soul gives birth, there is still only one Son, since it all happens in the now moment, the soul's eternal day.
It's so similar.
So similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so pretty believable to me.
Yeah, no, to me too, yeah.
Yeah. That book is Genesis Meditations, and it's about an ancient Hebraic mystical practice where they used visualization and somatics, so feeling and seeing in an internal meditative experience, kind of a self-hypnotizing, going all the way into a trance type of a thing. They would picture themselves. So they had time flipped around, so they didn't believe like we do that the past is behind us and the future is in front of us.
Okay.
Because they considered the goal to be to reintegrate with that which existed before the beginning. So the beginning was in front of them, and their spiritual ancestors connected them back to that beginning. So that's why they're always saying of Adam and of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob. and obsessed with this lineage type of stuff is because the lineage of spiritual ancestors connected them forward to the beginning of time, those who went before us, the ancestors, and the people who are going to exist in the future are behind me, following me back to the beginning where the goal is. Does that make sense?
It does. That's really interesting. It's like we are, like when the fall, if you will, happened, or like when separation began, we started walking away from this important point forward in time. And in order to get back there, we have to turn around and start going back now, as long as we continue to believe that
Yes.
the future is forward.
Right.
Then we're never going to get back because it's not going to loop back around. We have to like turn around back to it.
Exactly. Here's another way of saying, okay, so the Hebrews were very temporally oriented, whereas the Greeks were more spatially oriented, and we are a little bit more spatially oriented. So
Yeah.
okay. So I guess that makes, I don't have to elaborate on that as much if that clicks for you.
Yeah.
So they thought of their relationship to God being the relationship to the timeless. We think more of relationship to God being the relationship of God that transcends space. If I told you, if you had 10 limes in your arms and I said, okay, you need to get as fast as possible to either 0 or infinity limes, would you immediately start picking up limes or would you just drop them all?
Right. Yeah. You drop them. Yeah.
So God is 0 and God is infinity. So what's the fastest way to God? Just let go. Just fucking let go. Let go for God's sake of your body, your identity, your roles, your attachments, your stories, the intervals and aspects and degrees of the phenomenal world. Just drop them.
Your debts, fairness.
Yeah,
everything,
exactly.
Justice.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us as we forgive others. Washbuklan halbein wakstahin. It's untangle the snakes that keep us bound in confusion. It's help us drop it. Please help me drop it all today. That's Christian spirituality. And that Hebraic practice of turning around and re-experiencing the beginning is the temporal expression of what Eckhart is saying, which, well, Eckhart is expressing in temporal terms too. But here's an example of the temporal expression of the spatial expression of this same thing that he does cite in this book. Eckhart's favorite Indian sage is Ramana Maharshi. And Ramana Maharshi's practice was to repeatedly question who you are until you drop all false identities and encounter the only real identity, and then express that real identity and share it and extend it and live it out. So that's a spatial expression because I am my career, I am my gender, I am my age, I am my country of origin, I am the time and space intersection that I'm sitting in right now, I am my talents, I am this and this and this and this and this. But what am I that is aware enough to categorize and say I'm this and I'm that and I'm those and I'm these? Why is it that I can look around at me and say I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this? The I that's categorizing all of those things and experiencing the conversation that's all embedded in is awareness. I'm aware of all these elements of myself. So that awareness is the permanent identity of who I am, and all the rest are temporary, which is one step towards the realization that the awareness is what I actually am, and the temporary identities don't exist at all. So there's this in-between that's like, well, there's what we are permanently, and then there's what we are temporarily. And that's just a baby step towards, the only thing that we are is the light of being. There's nothing else exists but existence. And so where do I feel like going next? Yeah, the I versus me thing. This is somewhere that I feel like going next, actually.
I versus me.
Yeah, I versus me. So this is an idea from the Kybalion, from Egyptian mysticism. And the reason that I'm tying all these things together is that there's a coherent train of thought throughout Western mysticism that is about differentiating from the real self and the false self. And gender comes into it in a strange way that I've never heard anyone tie together. And so I'm going to try to tie it together in this way that I think is really helpful. So Eckhart was asked why there's all male pronouns in A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles only uses male pronouns. We are all God's son. Connecting with the Eternal Father. There's not
Eckhart
a single...
was asked this?
Yeah, in an interview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or actually, it's funny you ask because when I said that, I was like, I'm not sure if he was asked that or if he just volunteered this, because he was doing a YouTube talk on A Course in Miracles.
Okay.
And he was saying it's not for everybody because it uses this old-fashioned language. It's all male pronouns. It's all Christian language. That doesn't resonate with everybody.
Okay.
So I think that's what it was, actually. And then Gary Renard, who's another Course in Miracles teacher in Disappearance of the Universe, said, if you want to just replace them with female pronouns, go ahead. But if it's a hang up for you, then that's an obstacle. So just go ahead, but you shouldn't bother like both.
Yeah.
But I think there's actually something really significant about it being male pronoun language, in terms of the way that it ties together the history of Western mysticism, because in the Kybalion, there's these 7 principles, right, that kind of summarize being and the fundamental laws associated with it. Mm-hmm. The first 6 rules all apply to diversity because they're all dualistic. So the law of polarity, the law of vibration, the law of rhythm, the law of cause and effect. They're all of these blink, 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 blink. There's these ping pong kind of laws. Mm-hmm. Then the 7th one completely changes. And it is the concept of mental gender. And it's the me versus the I. And it's saying that the I is the true identity and the me is the external or false identity. So the me is the diversity that you express. And the I is the true, eternal, silent, still self beyond all form that exists in this kind of spacelessness. So it refers to the I as the male of the mental gender and the me as the female of the mental gender. Similarly, in the Old Testament, God the Father, or Yahweh, is perfectly present with or in eternal relationship to Chokhmah or Hakima, Hebrew and Aramaic, which is holy wisdom, which is their feminine counterpart of God. So the Hebrews had the male, the creator, and the female, the expression, and they're perfectly interlocked. Mm-hmm. The Kybalion has the I, the projector, and the me, the projection, the external identity, and they're in relationship. And only by operating from the I can you live a life that is driven by will. Because if you operate from the me, then you only operate in reaction to other events in the me. So you express the me, but you operate as the I. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't really matter which one of those is male versus female because you could express it the other way. It's like a language. It's like if I wanted to go, why is there an n sound in the word for on and a f sound in the word for off? I wish it was the other way around. It's like, well, you could. If you and I agree that off means on and on means off, we can communicate that way. Mm-hmm. But we already decided on which word means which, so let's just go with it, right? Sure. You could flip the archetypes, and you could say the female is the spacelessness that we emerge from because it's like an empty womb, and the male is the form that emerges from that because it's like a seed in the womb. Mm-hmm. You could flip them and express it the other way if you wanted to. But just in the history of Western mysticism, the male and female archetypes have been used that way. Books like A Course in Miracles and Power of Now, then, are books on the divine masculine, specifically, to use the Western archetypes in the way that they have been used historically, because they're about connecting with what's silent. So, for example, if you want a really well-rounded perspective on ancient Middle Eastern mysticism, read from Neil's work. You would read Genesis Meditations, which is about re-experiencing the beginning before any contents. Then read his Desert Wisdom, which is about engaging with the world in a way that's grounded in wisdom. If you want the masculine and the feminine in Eckhart's work, you read Power of Now, which is about connecting to what's beyond all form and contents. Then you read his second and only other book, A New Heaven, A New Earth, which is about what occurs when you express what's in this book. So this book is his treatise on the I, and Heaven and Earth, A New Heaven, A New Earth is his treatise on the me. For Genesis Meditations, this is his treatise on the I, or for Neil, this is his treatise on the I, Genesis Meditations, and then Desert Wisdom would be a treatise on the me, on how this is actually expressed in diversity. So in Desert Wisdom, he goes into the creation story in more detail. And so is that making sense, the I versus me thing?
I'm not totally getting it. And I'm wondering, is there some kind of connection between like... I'm trying to like rephrase it in like maybe words that might make more sense to me. Does this have to do with like subject and object in terms of like referring to yourself internally as just like thinking from your own perspective as I, or rather being kind of separated from yourself and you are then the object of the sentence me? So it's like separating from yourself. Does this have to do with like first and second person as in being deeply in the moment or being kind of separated from the moment?
The Kybalion addresses that duality specifically in the section on mental gender to say this is not subject and object.
Okay.
So because it's trying to point to something so abstract that it uses all the examples. So it says, for example, like, this is not like the left and right hemisphere of the brain, for example, where one's more subjective and one's more objective. One thinks in grayer terms and the other thinks in more clearly defined and articulated terms. It's not that kind of I versus me. The I is the pure consciousness that you experience. So if right now you dropped everything that you believe about anything,
Okay.
what would be left? Like, what would you experience?
I'd just be looking around, not getting what's going on, just looking at it.
You wouldn't be not getting what's going on, though. You'd be completely getting everything that's going on.
Okay. All right.
That's the I.
Okay.
And everything else is the me. So the subjective and objective ways of engaging with information or content or form are just two halves of the me. The I is like why is it that we don't just set everything down, right? Because I'm moving around with my body right now, but I'm perfectly comfortable to sit still. Perfectly comfortable sitting still. Why is it that conceptually, our relationship to concepts, we aren't comfortable sitting still? We believe that we would die if we did. The fact that we believe that we would die if we set down all concepts. Like, you tell the average person, I want you to set down all your connections to all your friends and family, all your beliefs and ideas about anything at all sense of self or any identity, concepts of time, space, form. I want you to just set all of it down and just see what you are without anything. If nothing at all existed that you associate with anything whatsoever and you believed and sensed nothing, you just set it all down like that. Like, what's their immediate reaction to that? It's like, that's psychotic. Like, I exist in relationship to my identities, like, you can call them attachments and be all Eastern, but I exist because of my attachments and identities and roles and responsibilities and characteristics. That's why I exist. If I set all that down, I'd be dead. Okay.
It's hard to believe that there's anything left after you get rid of everything imaginable.
Yes. If you get rid of everything imaginable, allness is left. Everything, one word, not two words. If you get rid of everything, two words, everything, one word is left.
Okay.
Everything is left. Night school.
Night school.
Part 2. We were rudely interrupted by the people who let us use this room for free. So I think we're going to have to go rent a commercial space.
Yeah.
So the point of a book like Power of Now or A Course in Miracles is to convince you to change your mind about that fundamental question, what would be left if I dropped all of my beliefs? Beliefs is one way to frame it. You drop all my beliefs, drop all my identities. You know, there's a lot of ways. Dropped all objects, dropped all concepts, whatever. There's a million ways to say, if I set down all finite things, what would be left? And the point of a program like Power of Now or like A Course in Miracles is to change your mind about how you answer that question. If you answer that question, I would be all. I would be perfect. I would be restored. I would be the eternal. Then you're not attached to the things. At least you're less attached to the things. Because there's a difference between answering the question like that. Like, I answer the question like that, but I'm speaking hypothetically, right? Because I'm still attached to stuff. But I hypothetically answer the question based on secondhand knowledge that I get from people like Eckhart Tolle or Eckhart Tolle or a book like A Course in Miracles. I don't actually believe it myself yet. I'm practicing believing it. So there's a difference between those. But that's what the programs are for. And that's the I. The I is who you are without any contents. The me is who you are with any contents.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
Awesome. So the Kybalion calls that mental gender and calls the I the male archetype and calls the me the female archetype. Now, there's a couple of ways to frame what the me is, and they're opposite. One of the ways to frame the me is the me doesn't exist at all because all that exists is unity, and the me only exists independence to or relationship to the I. But it could also be said the me completely exists, and everything in it completely exists. In other words, you can't say some of the me exists and some of it doesn't, but you can say the whole thing does in relationship to unity, or you can say none of it does because only in relationship to unity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all of the stuff in your life, all the contents, is it real? You could say, yes, all of it is 100% real. Everything in me that is the darkest and the lightest, everything in the world that I prefer the least and that I prefer the most, all of it I insist on holding as completely and equally real and valid. All of it. I deny nothing. I see all. And the Hebrews call that kind of mind holy wisdom. And that's an inclusive way to come to unity. And then there's this exclusive or negating way to come to unity that goes, none of this is real at all, because all of it is just an expression of unity. It has no ontological basis of its own. And those are two kind of opposite ways of approaching the same thing.
Yeah.
But the reason that, in my opinion, that A Course in Miracles uses male pronouns is because it's the negating path.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
It's the nothing is real
Yes.
path? Okay.
Yes. It's the nothing is real path. But A Course in Miracles goes back and forth masterfully between helping you to affirm what you are fundamentally and helping you to deny the externals that affect you and confuse you. Because if you just said to somebody every single day, yeah, you see that's not real, that's not real, that's not real, that's not real, you're going to like cause them to go into some kind of psychotic break because you're ripping a rug out from under them that they're still standing on.
Yeah.
But if you can teach them how to float while you move the rug out from under them gradually, then you can restore them. So that's what A Course in Miracles does.
Yeah. Does it gradually. Yeah.
Right.
That's cool.
Right. Now, Jungian psychology, on the other hand, is a more feminine approach, a more integrative approach, a more inclusive approach, because it's about coming to terms with everything that is the darkest in yourself, which is also to come to terms with what's darkest in being. So the Jungian approach, the shadow integration approach, is about going straight to Satan, going straight to Lucifer and going, what are you? Why are you a part of me? What is the function? What does this mean? I can't deny you. Let's negotiate. How exactly do we share unity? Because I'm uncomfortable with acknowledging that, which means I'm divided against myself. So it's a way of including whatever you most don't want to include until you're full. So Jung said, enlightenment is not achieved by imagining heavenly images, but by making the unconscious conscious. So that's the feminine holy wisdom, integrating the whole me kind of approach. A Course in Miracles is more of like a jnana yoga or Zen approach, which is just about establishing yourself in what is real and negating everything else. So you can look at your mind and drop all the contents, or you can look at your mind and embrace all the contents. Two systematic ways of doing the same thing. And Eckhart is on the masculine side to use the Western archetypal language.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Dope. What else did I have in here? I think that's about everything that I wanted to say about Course in Miracles. Yeah. You want to try a practice?
Sure.
Cool. So in the context of the discussion that we've had, I think it's cool to do a practice to solidify some of it so that it doesn't remain purely intellectual.
Okay.
And if obviously you and I are in a place where we don't believe experientially that if we dropped everything that we were, all would be left. We're at a place where experientially we still believe that if we dropped everything that we are, we would just pass away and die. So how do we practice believing that we are more than all of the identities and forms and attachments and everything? Meditation, because when you give your undivided attention to one thing that's very simple and fundamental, it brings you so much peace that you realize, when I become more established in what's within myself and what's eternal and what is simple presence, it makes my life easier. It makes me more effective. That means that part of me is more real. And if you go, because if I gave you two practices right now and I said, make a list of everything that you identify as, and just affirm to yourself, I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this. Well, that might actually aid you, because if you looked at all your identities together, you might notice that you're what identifies as them all. So it might be a bad example. But one identity, for example, if you just spent the next 10 minutes just getting obsessed with one of your identities, and then you spent another 10 minutes just paying attention to your breath, you would have so much more peace after the breath one, because you're practicing setting down all of the externals. You're focused just on this kind of mysterious, simple process. There was a line in actually the first line of the Beatitudes, for example, Tu buehon lamaskane baruch. It means you are made ripe when you experience your breath as what you are fundamentally, as your first and last possession. You cling to your breath as the thing that you own first and last. Mm-hmm. You are ripened by your connection just directly with the breath, which is very Buddhist sounding. But yeah. Do you remember the peace that you would feel when you meditated? Like, do you remember when on a road trip and you stopped and meditated in the car? You were in that phase where you were meditating a lot.
Yeah. I was really good about it for a year or so. I was doing it every day.
Yeah. Was your objective as far as like what you gave your attention to initiate the meditative state? Was it to just drop your thoughts, or was it to bring the attention to the breath?
I guess, I was trying to think about nothing, but I think I found that too difficult. And so the breath was what I was settling on. But I was using the breath. I was focusing on the breath typically. Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to do that again, or do you want to try a different one?
Sure, we could do that. Huh?
That was like an either or.
We could do breath.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. Well, you want to tell me how you used to do it?
Well, I guess, do you think it's not the best like practice to do, or what do you?
I think the best practice to do is whatever you have had the most success with and build from there. So that's why that's what I was gauging was like, did you have success with that practice? And so it's best to build off from, the foundation that you already have. Mm-hmm. Or was it more like I did that practice for a while, but stopped because it didn't really work for me? In which case it would be great to try a different one. That's what I was kind of fishing for.
I think, following the breath has been what has made me feel most successful at meditating.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So then to connect that practice with this discussion, the invitation that I am going to like extend to myself and to you as we go into this process is to practice the attention to the breath, inviting our sense of identity into the practice. Because right now I'm identifying as a body, and you're identifying as a body as we're sitting here talking. Mm-hmm. What we give our full attention to, we identify with. Let's look at our breath, keeping in mind the possibility that it's what we actually are, that it's closer to what we actually are than right here. We're identifying as a body and a personality. We're identifying as students. We're making content. We're identifying as friends with Evan. We're in a particular place. There's a lot of identities right here. Mm-hmm. But if we look at our breath with our undivided attention, we not exactly look at, but more we feel the process of breathing. We're going to feel the process of breathing with a sense of identity, as though it's closer to what we really are than what we were paying attention to before we tuned fully into the feeling of the process of breathing.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
How many minutes do you want to do? And we'll just cut
10?
this out and we'll let people, do whatever they want. Yeah,
sure.
We'll do 10 and we'll just cut it out.
Okay.
Well, then I guess we'll just say night school and that'll be the end of the episode. And then if the people watching feel like meditating, then they can meditate too.
Unless we might have something to say afterwards about the experience. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So you can fast forward 10 minutes from here, Evan. You got any thoughts?
I hope not.
Got him. I just need to do it more often because I still find myself, it was pretty good, but I still find myself just, I've been thinking for a minute about something and then I have to go back. Yeah. It's very easy to get off the path.
Yeah.
But yeah, I need to get back to doing it more consistently, and I'm sure I'd get better at it.
Well, I think there's a lot of curriculums out there that are combinations of practices and the instructional words of somebody who is a master of that particular practice. Power of Now and A Course in Miracles are both really good examples because in A Course in Miracles, every day there's an invitation to sit and steep in an idea. So like today, my idea is I will there be light. As in it is my will that there be light. Kind of in reference to let there be light. It's about tuning my will to God's will. Mm-hmm. And so I'm exclaiming, I will there be light to tune myself to God's will, let there be light. And I have to just sit and steep in that thought for like 15 minutes. And the longer that I steep in the thought, the more I feel like everything glowing. And reading like a 2 or 3 page text before doing that helps prime my thinking so that I'm more likely to have a mystical experience when I steep in the mantra. It makes it way more effective.
Yeah.
Tolle does the same thing in Power of Now, where he says every time you see this little squiggle, just stop and soak in the previous line. So it's a very similarly constructed curriculum. And then when you get to like chapter 13 or so, there's a chapter called Portals to the Unmanifested. Chapter 7, Portals into the Unmanifested. Going deeply into the body, the source of chi, dreamless sleep, other portals, silence, space, the true nature of space and time, and conscious death. And those 8 subchapters all contain practices for having mystical experiences. And the way that he articulates the truth about what presence really is and the way that he explains the spiritual practices are so lined up with one another that it's really, really effective. It's a lot more effective to follow along. And Neil Douglas Klotz's books are the same. So if I open this book randomly right here, this chapter, The Way Ahead, is the beginning. He's giving some teachings on Islam, and then he gives... That's funny, that chapter doesn't have a practice. He just proved me incorrect. Okay, the caravan of creation. This is about how they pictured a caravan, a line of their ancestors leading back to the beginning.
Okay.
So he describes how they visualize time differently, and then he gives his translation of the word Bereshit, which is the first word of the Bible. And then he offers a meditation for experiencing what they meant by Bereshit and how the sounds in the word Bereshit connect to a somatically experienced narrative version of what the word means to them. So it's a story that you feel happening in your body in contemplation. So he explains how they see time. Then he gives his translation of the sacred text. Then he gives a meditation based on that translation. So it's all coherent, and he's personally extremely competent in doing and experiencing these exercises, and sets aside weeks in devotion to just doing a practice so that he can fully experience it, so that when he transmits it, it's not just an intellectual teaching, it's a heart transmission. The sound of Eckhart's voice says what the book says, right? So it's not just teaching in the intellectual sense. So I highly recommend that, because if we just do the same practice over and over again without hearing the words and teachings and instructions and guidance of somebody who's a master of that practice, we can just do it wrong every single time. It's like singing for 10 years without ever tuning yourself to a piano. Like, you're just going to sing the wrong notes for 10 years instead of have somebody straighten you out for a week and then sing the right notes for 10 years.
Right.
Having 10 years of practice singing the notes correctly versus having 10 years of practice singing the notes incorrectly is 2 very, very different things.
Sure.
And so I really highly recommend that. And I think I think the Power of Now is a great curriculum with a much more universal appeal than A Course in Miracles. And so highly recommend it, that you or anybody, complete this curriculum, all the practices, all the readings, contemplate every single thing.
Yeah.
Don't skip a step, because your ego wants you to skip steps in this book so that you don't hear what the fucking book is saying. You will try to trick yourself out of learning what it's saying. So just follow every single word, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Notice the discomfort, because then maybe you could experience life the way he does, which is great.
Yeah. And I definitely did that when I read that book. I didn't do a lot of those practices. I'd just skipped and kept reading the book.
Right.
When I presented it on the show. And I should be doing more getting in the right mindset before meditating, because so often I just plop down in a chair right after doing whatever else I was doing and then pretty much just think for 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which doesn't really get me anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. And I've never completed this book as a curriculum either, just for the record. I've committed to doing that with A Course in Miracles, but I've never done that with this one. And so I'm still, dumb for recommending it because I've never done it. But pick a curriculum and then just stick with that curriculum because it's designed. It is designed by a perspective that sees so far beyond yours. You have no idea why you're supposed to follow along with it the way that you are. Just do it.
Yeah.
Sadhguru was asked about Kriya Yogas, which are like yoga systems that have you do extremely specific physical and mental and spiritual instructions. And he's like, oh, it's the best path because you have a master just tell you step this way and this way and this way and now do this. And they do weird shit like swallowing water and then puking it up to clean their guts and on all sorts of weird stuff in Kriya Yoga. He's like, every single thing in this practice is designed to completely awaken you to reality, physical, mental, and spiritual process. But everybody today, they need to understand every step before they go forward. They can't just follow instructions. If they could just follow the instructions, they would be like so much more awakened than they can imagine, but they just can't, they won't listen.
Yeah.
And it's so our condition. So yeah.
Interesting.
Great to pick a curriculum and just do it because he knows what he's talking about. You can tell when you listen to him.
Yeah, I love him. I loved the book. I love his voice. I love listening to the audio book. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got any other thoughts or questions?
I don't think so. No.
Night school.
Night school.